Hello, friends. This is Doug Schaible, and welcome to the Premature Bible Institute. Trust you had a good week and had a good time, what you've been doing and starting off this summer and everything. Mine has slowed down a little bit for me, but it's also given me a chance to do what I'm doing now, which is this podcast, but it also gives me a chance to do something extra that I'm going to be introducing with this lesson. All of you have been listening to my podcast for some time now, and I do appreciate that. But I'm also going to try doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a video podcast. And as a matter of fact, this particular podcast is a video podcast, and I'm pulling the audio off of it to put on as the audio portion of a podcast too. So there'll be two different ways that you can hear this. One is audio, one is video, but it'll be something a little bit different and maybe reach a different market at the same time, different group of people that might be able to listen to it and use it. So unfortunately, I'm starting off with lesson 26 on this rather than lesson 1 as my video. But what I plan on doing is, as I can, I'm going to go back and redo those earlier ones so that people can have both the video and audio of everything I've done up to this point. But for right now, we're going to start off with this video podcast, and then when I get done with it, I'll put the audio over on the audio portion of it, and you can listen to it just the same as you always have. So let's start talking here a little bit. We want to go back and do a brief history of almost everything, which is there was a time when there was only God. There was nothing else. And God existed. And God was perfect, and he was omniscient and omnipotent and all-powerful and eternal and all the different things that we talked about God being. And those things have meaning to them. They have implications to that and understanding that. But then there came a point where he decided, for whatever reason he wanted to, he started to create. And he created a physical world, he created a spiritual world, and in that spirit world there were angels and archangels and cherubim and seraphim, and in the physical world there was the universe, the planets, the sun, the moon, the stars, people, animals, and all those different things to inhabit that. But he made something very unique, and that was humans. And with humans, he gave them dominion over the earth to rule it. He made a male, he made a female, and they were together. Everything was perfect. It couldn't have been better. Their relationship to each other was perfect. Their relationship to God was perfect. Their relationship to everything was perfect. And that's what God did. And so he wanted people to manage the earth and take care of that, and everything couldn't have been better. The food was great, everything. But we know what happened. We know that the man and the woman decided to do something that was contrary to what God's desire for them to do was. They had everything they needed to enjoy life and everything, but they decided that they didn't have enough. They needed just one more thing, and that was that fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then as a result of that, they sinned. Their thinking became irrational. Remember, they tried to cover themselves from a God who knows everything. Then they tried to hide from a God who's everywhere. And then they tried to lie to a God and pass the blame on to each other and so on. As a result, God told them that the day that they ate from that tree, they would die. And we talked about the three different types of death, spiritual, physical, and eternal. And so although they didn't die eternally right at that point, they didn't die physically right at that point, but the death process started at that point. And so they were going to, just like you cut a tree down, the leaves don't immediately fall off, turn brown, and wither away. It takes time because there's still sap in that tree that feeds the leaves and so on. But eventually the source of that is going to stop, and then they're going to die. And that's the same way with us. Adam and Eve were cut off from the source of their life. As a result, God put them out of the garden. He said, I don't want them to be in the garden because there's another tree there called the tree of life. And if you eat from that tree, you'll live forever. So God put them out, guarded that way from the tree of life with the cherubim that could, and with a flaming sword. And God put them out. Outside of the garden, Adam had two children, Cain and Abel. As a result of that, Cain killed Abel, and there's the story of that. Cain decided to come to God in his own way, and Abel came to God in God's way. But Cain was jealous, or he didn't like what Cain had done, and he got upset. But whatever the reason, he killed Abel, his brother, and God confronted him about it. Abel still didn't want to face the consequences of that, or at least admit to the consequences so God could deal with it. And so there was judgment brought upon him. And as time went on, We see that the earth was just increased in number. There were people born, children born, women born, men born, and the earth increased at a tremendous rate, probably at an astronomical numbers, because people were living 7, 8, 900 years. And they were so they could have a lot of children that time, and each one of their children could have a lot of children during that time. But then it came to a point where God says, he says, the earth has become corrupt. It's become as awful as can possibly be. He says, I'm going to have to wipe the earth out. I'm going to have to wipe out every man, woman, and child and animal and everything that breathes. I'm going to have to wipe out. And he says, in 120 years, he was going to do that. And so but there was one man, one family, and it says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And so God told Noah about this, and he says, listen, in 120 years, man's going to I'm going to deal with man once and for all, or I'm going to deal with man just deal with the situation. I'm going to wipe them out. And so he instructs Noah on what he should do. He should start building this ark, this big ship, this floating boat. And he says, you're going to be able to put animals on board, all the animals that breathe and so on. And so Noah started that process of building this ark. And, the only way a person could be saved was to get into that ark. And so for 120 years, Noah, it says, it called him a preacher of righteousness. And he did all of this, and he did it. And then the day came, was 7 days before the flood came. God told Noah to get all the animals, bring them on the ark. For 7 days, people watched these animals and everything get on the ark. And they only came through the one door that God told them to build, which was in the side of the ark. He told them the exact length, the exact width, the exact height it was supposed to be built. And he told them, he says, just put this one door in the side of the ark. And everything was to enter in through that. And then came the point at the end of that 7 days that when the 7 days, there was the point where Noah and his family got on the ark, and it says, and God shut the door. So God shut the door, and at that point, everybody that was inside was saved from judgment, but everybody on the outside was saved from mercy. There was no hope for them. They could not be saved once that door was shut, because God shut the door, and that was the end of the matter. And so at the end of that 7 days, it says that the rain came, and he says, and the fountains of the deep busted open. We have no idea what that looked like. It was awful. So this water was raising. And like I said, if Mount Everest was around at that time, and we don't know that it was or wasn't, we don't even know what the terrain looked like. There was just water and ground. It wasn't shaped like a North America, South America, and whatever. We don't know what it looked like. But it says that so much water was on the earth that it covered all the mountains. And it says, and it was up, the boat was floating up on that mountains, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and all the water was gushing up from underneath. And so it did that. And so we're going to talk about this a little bit. In the last lesson, I said, God gave the people 120 years to turn from their evil ways and just to repent of what they were, but they wouldn't do it. And everyone, remember this, everybody that was alive had access to someone, or at least two people, that were there before sin, and that was Adam and Eve. Adam lived 930 years, it says. So there was one man there by the name of Methuselah, the oldest man recorded in the Bible, who lived 969 years. And he had access to Adam, and he had access to Noah. So he personally knew both of those people. And so they were the ones continuing this story on, telling him not only Methuselah, but the whole line from Adam to Seth and so on and so forth, all the way down until it reached Noah. But God was going to provide only one way for people to escape this judgment, and that was that ark. And if they would just get inside, they would be saved from this. And they could, like I said, they could only enter in through the one door of the ark. Now, Noah and his family have been up in this boat for a long time. The rain has been coming. It's been going on and on and on. And after 40 days and 40 nights, it says the rain stopped. And then the boat just floated. And it floated up there for a long, long time. And so then it says this, and I want to read here in chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. And then I'm going to jump from 14 to 14 verse through 17. So chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. Then God remembered Noah and every living thing, and all the animals that were with him on the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were also stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained, and the waters receded continually from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the water decreased. Then the ark rested in the seventh month, the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. So we can see that there was a lot of water, and it just took a long time, and the waters were receding during this time. But at the end of the seventh month, on the 17th day of the month, it says the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat, and over there in the Middle East. And then it goes to verse 14, and it says this, "And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So God was telling him, he says, okay, now at the end of this time, the mountains were resting on Ararat, and then God finally told him, okay, you can leave. Now, it isn't like it rested on the mountains of Ararat and they just opened the door and everybody got out. You need to understand how long they were sitting there waiting in the ark after the ark rested. Now, it says out here, in the second month, the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. Okay? And then it says here, in the second month, but he says, forgive me here for just a second. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back here just a second. At the end of 150 days, okay, here it is. And the ark rested in the seventh month, the 17th day of the month on the mountains of Ararat. Okay, the seventh month, the 17th day of the month. And then it says here, in the second month, on the 27th day of the month. So for 7 months, they were sitting there waiting in the ark before they could even get out of it. So the ark rested on the mountain, and they had to wait for 7 more months in order for the earth to dry up enough for where they could come out. That's a long time to be sitting there. But I want you to understand something too. How long were they in this ark? Now, if you go back to in chapter 7, where the flood was starting, it says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. So here it is, the second month, the 17th day of the month, and when they get out of the ark, it says the second month, the 27th day of the month. So they were in that ark from the time they got in there. They were in there just a little over a year and 10 days from the times over. Actually, a year and 17 days, because they were on the ark for 7 days before the floods even started. So for a year and 17 days, they were sitting inside that ark. And all that time, and by the end of probably the first day or two, they knew that everybody had been wiped out by that point. There wasn't anything left. All the animals, people, all their relatives were dead, all their friends were dead, all the people that they had grown up and known. Even Methuselah was dead at that point, it was his grandfather. His father was dead, all of those people. So that's where they were at, and they were coming out of the ark. Now, like I said, they had been in there for a little over a year now. But I want you to understand something about this. What can we learn about that? While they were there, guess what? Who protected them? Remember where God said, come into the ark? And that's the idea, is that they came in. God was in there because he's saying come. He's using the verb to come into the ark, not go into the ark. Come into the ark. So God was there, and he protected them. He protected them. And God was the one that provided for them. He provided. We may think, oh, well, Noah and his family were the ones that got all the food, but you don't understand who created the food to begin with. Who created the animals to begin with? Who created all of that stuff? God was the one that created. God provided everything for them. The wood to build the ark, the water to raise the ark, the pitch to seal the ark, the door to enclose the ark. God provided everything for them, the air for them to breathe, the water for them to drink. All of these things God had already provided for them. So he provided for them. God is the one who controlled the weather that he himself had created. So God is the one that made the fountains of the deep to break open. God is the one who caused the rain to fall. God is the one that caused the wind to move the waves back and so on and dry up the earth. God provided everything. All Noah and his family did was set on the ark. There was nothing else for them to do. So, did God keep his promise? Did God do as he said he was going to do? You bet he did, because God keeps his word. Like I told you, I think once before, there was a missionary back in the 1800s by the name of David Livingstone. And he used to say this. He says, God is a gentleman, and a gentleman always keeps his word. And that's what God is. Once again, and here's another thing to think about. Remember we talked about when Satan tried to rebel against God in heaven, did he win? No. When Satan tried to corrupt, he did corrupt Adam and Eve through what he did, but did he win in that situation and the whole thing fell apart? No, it didn't. God won in that one. Because how? He told Eve he would provide a deliverer. When Cain killed Abel, did God stop the line from going forward and at the end of all men? No, he provided Seth and so on. And so he provided the ark and he did all that. So God keeps his command. And once again, God won. Satan thought he maybe had won when all the earth had corrupted itself before God. But God once again won, as he always wins. So, now in all of this, God gave promises, and he also gave commands to Noah. As they were coming out of the ark, as they came out of the ark, God had some instructions for him. And here it goes in Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. It says, So God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, here's what he said, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Gee, does that sound familiar? Yes, that's the very first command in the Bible. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And so his command was for the sexual relationship, once again, to be within the boundaries that God had decided for it to be in. Is the man and the woman were to have children, fill the earth, subdue it, control it, manage it, all of that. So it says, and fill the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, on every bird of the air, on all that moves on the earth, and on all fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Now, God gave control over all the animals to Noah, Seth, Ham, and Japheth, and all their wives, and then all of their descendants as a result of that. God still wanted man to manage the earth and rule over it. He did not want the earth to rule over man. He wanted man to rule over the earth. But there is a difference between this command and the one that he gave to Adam and Eve. When God gave the command to Adam and Eve to manage the earth, rule over it, there was no animosity between the animal kingdom and the people. But now, instead of harmony in this thing, like in the Garden of Eden where there was harmony, the animals would fear man. See, that's a big difference. See, before there was no fear. Adam and Eve could go up and pet the tigers, the lions, the wolverines, or whatever, but now they can't. The animals would fear man. They'd try and stay away from him. Why do you think we have traps for animals? Is it because we expect them to come to us? Of course not. We expect to catch them, and we have to use our wits in order to survive in that thing. So that's one of the things that is a big, big difference there from between when God said this and when man said this. But now remember, when God told the man and the woman to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, they could have been filled with all people who were perfect, who had no sin nature. But now every single descendant of Noah and his family, every one of those people were going to be born with a sin nature, just like Adam and Eve's children and descendants were after the fall. And we saw the result of that. God had to destroy the earth because of it. So, God, as a result of this, God comes out, or I'm not saying God comes out. Noah and his family are now outside the ark, and God has those instructions, and then he also tells them something else. Remember what happened when God put Adam and Eve out of the garden, and he put them out there, and he said something to them. He made a promise to them. He told the serpent, he says, look, he says, the seed of the woman is going to destroy you. He shall bruise your head, but you shall bruise his heel. Remember? So he came out of the garden, Adam and Eve came out of the garden, and it looked like there could be no hope because eternal death was part of that process. Excuse me. But God left them with a promise. God left them with hope. And God's going to do the same here with Noah. Let's just see what it is. And God is going to give a sign, by the way, to Noah and his family and everybody after him that he was never going to destroy the earth with a flood again. Let's see what he says. Genesis chapter 9, verse 12 through 15. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you, and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations." Perpetual. That means from now on. There's no stopping of this. There's no end to this covenant that I'm making with you. It's going to continue on. To this day it is. "I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh." So the rainbow, the picture of the rainbow that we see in heaven, is every time we look at that thing and we see all the different colors there, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, every one of those is telling us that God will never again destroy the earth with a flood. And he doesn't say he'll never destroy the earth again, but not till the end. But for now, he says, "I will never again destroy the earth with a flood." That's the end of that matter. The rainbow is a perpetual reminder from God that he will never again destroy the earth with a flood. Now, thousands of years later, even before our time, but thousands of years after this event, people still remembered, and they reminded other people of God's promise to Noah and his descendants. And here's one. In Psalm 104, verses 6 through 9. It says this: "You covered it," talking about the earth, "you covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the voice of your thunder they hastened away. They went up over the mountains. They went down into the valleys, to the place which you founded for them. You have set a boundary that they may not pass over, that they may not return to cover the earth." There will never, ever be a time, I don't care what any global warmist says or global environmentalist says, the earth will never again be covered with a flood. It won't. It just won't. God's made the promise, and that's what that rainbow's for. But now you take the picture of a rainbow, and look how we've perverted it and made it into a symbol for something else. The purpose of it, God gave it as a reminder that he will never again destroy the earth with a flood. Others use it as a symbol for we can do anything we want. And God says, no, you can't. But they say, yes, we can. We can treat other people any way we want. We can do anything we want. And remember, what's the command right before God sets this rainbow in the cloud? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. God has kept his word. He has not destroyed the earth with a flood again. Another thing, always remember this. Every time you see a rainbow, I trust that every time you look at that thing, no matter how small or big, that you'll think, you know what? God has kept his promise. He hasn't. He hasn't given us another flood. He has not destroyed the human race. There will come a time when everything will be done and be over with, and we'll talk about that another time. Well, friends, that's going to be it for this week. Just want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Premature Bible Institute. And just to make this simple, what I would suggest, if you have some friends that want to listen to this, just tell them to go to my blog site at tribalschaible.com or tribalschaible.org. And at the end of this video podcast, there will be a little screen that will tell you that so you know how to get the spelling right. But for those that are listening on audio, it's tribalschaible.com or .org. Either one will get to it. And you can go onto the podcast page, and I've got 3 links there to subscribe. One is Apple Podcast. One of them is Google Play Music. And the other one is the YouTube channel that you can subscribe to also. I need to get 100 subscribers onto that for this lesson anyway. And then I'll have an easier way to find the YouTube. But if you want to, just get on Google and type in Premature Bible Institute, and then click on the either videos or whatever, and you can find the YouTube channel for this video also. So with that being said, just want to say thanks, and I'll have the information up for you here in just a second. Take care. Have a good evening. Good night.